Hello and welcome to Wednesday Warfare, where I review NXT and AEW Dynamite back-to-back and try and figure out which show won for the week. And as always, like what you like, don't be a dick, let's begin. The champion Finn Balor opens up NXT and says if you want to get to know him, you gotta face him in the ring. Pete Dunne shows up and he says, it's only a matter of time these two would face off in the ring because they're cut from the same cloth. Kyle O'Reilly then appears and says, they have unfinished business from TakeOver 31. Damian Priest shows up and says he wants a shot at the championship as well. The three of those guys start to argue and Finn just up and leaves the ring. He's got no time for this. Kyle makes fun of something Pete Dunne says, repeating what he says but in this very exaggerated accent. I feel there's some edict right now in the company where if you're doing a promo against like Sheamus or Drew McIntyre or Pete Dunne, part of your burn on them is you gotta mock their accent. Seems like a really weird trend I'm seeing right now across all the shows. Then after all that happens, Finn says, oh, New Year's Evil, I'm gonna be defending my championship, but against who? That's for Regal to decide. Suddenly, KARRION Kross's music plays, and Scarlett and her giant spiky shoulders shows up on stage. And so Finn says, if KARRION wants it, when he's ready, then so is Finn. Finn leaves, and then Damian tells Scarlett, if KARRION wants a fight to step up to him like a man. Scarlett gives a smile and then leaves. Ooh, foreshadowing. Then after the break, we see Pete Dunne about to be interviewed when Killian Dane shows up. We haven't seen him since he got his head smashed into the car door by Pat's Pack a few weeks ago. Starts brawling with Pete, and then he gets all broken up and everything. We find out those two will have a match later tonight. But I'm enjoying the chaos and all the different threads we're seeing in just this opening segment and then the interview spot after the break. We're seeing Finn Balor. We're seeing all these potential challengers for his championship. And we're seeing, this whole thing break out with Finn and Killian and all these different ways these different characters could go. So I really liked the setting, the tone that was set in this opening bit. First match sees Jake Atlas versus Isaiah Swerve Scott. Relatively short match here, but I appreciated the athleticism that both guys had. They were just going like mile a minute here in this matchup. In the end, Atlas is able to roll up Scott in kind of a surprising fashion to win the matchup. Like I said, pretty short match from bell to bell. Isaiah looks very mad. He rejects Jake's handshake and he looks very scowly as he walks off. This definitely seems like a big telegraph to an inevitable heel turn, but we'll see. Tommaso Ciampa backstage saying he picked a fight with Timothy Thatcher at TakeOver because he just wanted to prove to himself that he could still go, and now that he has, no one is safe. He calls out Cameron Grimes, saying he is brash, ignorant, but confident, or is it insecure? We're going to find out that later tonight. Imperium take on the Grizzled Young Veterans and Everrise in a triple threat tag team match. After the actions of all three teams last week, we have this match here. Everrise just spend most of the match hanging outside the ring, kind of picking their spots and trying to be very opportunistic, taking advantage of what the other two teams do, but ultimately Drake and Gibson hit the Ticket to Mayhem to chase Parker to win the match. I thought it was okay. Everrise get a bit more of a rub by being involved in whatever's going on with Imperium and the Vets, and I think get to see a bit more of their characters shine here. I want to see more of a push of Everrise. We've seen them as kind of these jobber characters for a long time, and they can still be that way, but I want to see more of their characters shine through. We're getting just a little bit of that the last couple weeks. We get a recap package of the War Games matches, and we hear some sound bites from the participants about how hellish it was, and then we see Toni Storm being interviewed backstage where, why did she turn on Ember Moon? And she says, she was at the wrong place at the wrong time. Ember stole my thunder. It was sticking in her craw ever since. Then SHIRAI, the champion, shows up and just says, I don't have a problem with you. I just don't like you. Then she decks Toni. Sounds like you have a problem with her then, if that's how you initiate the conversation. So they start brawling and they make their way to the ringside area. Io's about to go for a moonsault, but Toni escapes. Ember Moon shows up and brings Toni back into the ring, so Io gives her the moonsault after all. Looks like we got something set up here between these three when it comes to title picture, I would imagine. Maybe some more unfinished business with Toni and Ember before either one of them move on to face SHIRAI, but we'll see. Up next, Cameron Grimes takes on Tommaso Ciampa. Early on, Timothy Thatcher shows up with a chair and just sits down right by the entrance ramp and gets a front row seat at this matchup here. Nice technical bout between these two. I really enjoyed it. In the end, we've got Tyler Rust, the former Russ Taylor. He shows up at ringside. He's the one who was part of Thatcher's Thatch Can last week. So he distracts Ciampa. The look on Thatcher's face when he catches Tyler run past him was so great. I will always pop for Timothy Thatcher's just facial mannerisms here. He's so good at that. It's so subtle, but he just nails it every time I see him on camera. So Ciampa overcomes that distraction, hits the Willow's Bell on Cameron to win. Ciampa and Thatcher exchange some words here, but they eventually back off. Ciampa leaves, and then Cameron Grimes has more of an issue with Thatcher, who is tired of his shit. He basically flips him over by his leg, and that's where that segment ends. Although it was a good match with a very interesting post-match exchange. But yeah, again, I'm digging Timothy Thatcher right now in his current role. We get a Raquel Gonzalez interview backstage where she says that it's because of Ember Moon that Dakota Kai is injured after War Games, so she's going to take that aggression out on Ember tonight. Then we go to see more secret training / torture of Xia Li and Boa in their undisclosed dark location where Xia Li is just working those, I don't know what they're called, so forgive my ignorance of it, the fighting sticks where you punch those, train, I guess. She's doing that until her knuckles start to bleed. Meanwhile, Boa is getting the hell beat out of him with a kendo stick until he's knocked silly. We get this final quick shot of like the spooky boss lady's eyes before we cut to black. Nothing more that's learned or gained from this. We're just learning more about what these two are going through. And again, whatever the payoff of this is, I'm totally ready for whatever. I'm very excited about this one right now. It's time for a Gargano celebration. You got Johnny, the new 3-time North American champion, Candice LeRae, and you got Indy Hartwell and Austin Theory tagging along with them. Johnny does a little jig in the ring in celebration before he starts talking. He says that they are the way, and Austin chimes in, yeah, the Milky Way. Okay, apparently Austin's new character is he's an idiot. Johnny calls Candice Mrs. War Games because she's 2-0 in the War Games matches now. They present her a trophy. Before they reveal it, though, they have like Indy and Austin. He wants them to do a drum roll, and they both kind of fail at it. And Austin, I think, just flexes his pecs to try and like simulate the sound of a drum roll. Your guess is as good as mine. He reveals the trophy, and it's like this cheap old trophy with like a Bratz doll head with green hair on to represent Shotzi Blackheart. We get more goofy stuff with like Johnny and Austin when Damian Priest shows up. He wants a piece of Austin after costing him the match on TakeOver. When suddenly Karrion Kross shows up. We've not seen him since he relinquished the NXT title due to injury earlier this year. He's back and he beats the hell out of Damian. He power bombs him into part of the stage set area. He just leaves, gets in the car with Scarlett, who I can't believe she's able to sit there comfortably with those shoulder spikes as they drive off. I thought that I was very excited to see Kross come back here. I've been wanting to see him come back and breathe some life into the NXT scene right now. Sucks we didn't get to see what he could do as champion the first time around, but I have confidence they'll give him that opportunity again someday. Also, I did get a kick out of the Gargano clan here and how goofy they all kind of were. I'm not sure how sustainable that is, but I get a laugh out of it, and so that they're winners in my book. Backstage, Tyler Rust is being interviewed about his association with Timothy Thatcher when suddenly Malcolm Bivens walks in. Since last week he gave Tyler his card, he wants to talk business with him, so we'll see where that leads. Then it's time for Pete Dunne versus Killian Dane. It's a very physical, brawly type match with these two. Dane begins to overpower Dunne for the first part of the matchup here. He even has a top rope fisherman suplex, which is very impressive. Lorcan and Burst try and interfere, but then Drake Maverick, Killian's tag team partner, shows up trying to chase them off until they turn around and beat him up. Dane gets out of the ring and chases them off. Then he gets back in the ring. Dunne capitalizes, hits the bitter end to win. I thought this was a fun match. Dane had some great fire in this one, and so I'm looking forward to seeing more of the crazy misadventures of Killian and Drake. We're backstage with the former North American champion Leon Ruff, and we get this point here where I feel it's a pattern I saw not just on NXT tonight, but also in AEW. It's this recurring trope where somebody's being interviewed, and before they get a chance to open their mouths, somebody walks in and interrupts. Like, I saw that no fewer than 5 or 6 times tonight across both shows. It's a very annoying trope when it's done once, let alone that many times. Stop that. In this case, it's the Gargano clan who walk up and interrupt Leon Ruff, and basically they have a tag team match next week, but Damian Priest is out, so Johnny says, oh, it'll be 2-on-1 next week. And then when they leave, Kushida walks up and offers to be Leon Ruff's partner. So that's what we're going to apparently have next week. It's all fine and good, but just stop with these interview cutoffs. I'll be talking about that across both shows in this review. Main event time as Raquel Gonzalez takes on Ember Moon. Raquel looking very strong to begin here. Ember makes her comeback, and then they're on the outside. Ember begins to climb like the steel beams that I think were there to support the War Games cage on Sunday. Why are they still there? I don't know. But Raquel catches her and does a kind of a snake eyes thing, head first throw into the ring post, which looks very stiff. Ember goes for the Eclipse, but Raquel catches her, which I don't think anyone has done before, hits a one-arm powerbomb to win the match in very emphatic fashion. I thought it was a great match here, really solid main event, and Gonzalez just looks strong as hell, keeping her momentum going. Toni Storm shows up because she's not done with Ember Moon, but suddenly Rhea Ripley shows up and makes the save. We get the stare down between Raquel and Rhea, and Raquel finally leaves the ring as we fade to black. I thought, we're continuing the angle between Raquel and Rhea. I think it's been a very subtly good year for Gonzalez, kind of like a slow burn all these months she's been with Dakota Kai, and then just in the last 4 or 5 weeks or so. It's been really cranking up. I'm really enjoying this progression for Raquel right now. I'm looking forward to seeing where she goes in the next 6 months. Dynamite this week begins with a match of the Young Bucks and the Hybrid 2. This match is very fast-paced, very flippy. All 4 guys very proficient in that style. So if you like that style, this match is definitely for you. We don't get to see the Hybrid 2 on Dynamite all that often, so they're definitely pulling out many of the stops in this match, making the most of their time on TV. Matt powerbombs Jack Evans into the Acclaimed, who are sitting in the front row, and then later on we get a Super Meltzer driver onto Evans on the outside, followed up with a BTE trigger onto Angelico in the ring for the Bucks to win. Like, Jesus, this match was like breakneck speed. Probably the flippiest match, or one of the flippiest matches I've seen in quite some time. The Acclaimed want to storm the ring and attack, but SCU cut them off. Very similar to what we saw in the backstage segment they had last week when they were first on TV. So we'll see where that goes. But yeah, very frenetic opening match. We get an MJF promo where he says he'll be disappointing a lot of not so smart marks tonight when he bashes in Orange Cassidy's head to retain the Dynamite Diamond ring. Then we get a Darby Allin video where he's shown inkblot tests that look strikingly similar to some members of Team Taz. He says, he'll be beating Brian Cage to retain the TNT Championship at one point. The video then ends with him looking at an inkblot of Sting's makeup, and he has this kind of smirk and a chuckle, and that's where it ends, kind of foreshadowing. Then it's time for Cody Rhodes in the house. Tony Schiavone wants to interview him, asking what he thought of Sting's debut last week. Before Cody can say anything though, Sting appears in the ring for the much hyped Sting Speaks segment here. Boy, people just don't like other people doing interviews, do they? So Arn's the first to speak here. Arn Anderson, who's got a history with Sting, saying, I had to look at you one more time to make sure it was real. He says, I'm going to leave you two to your own devices. He leaves. Tony wants to leave, but then Sting, come on, man, let's have a hug. Let's hug it out here. I haven't talked to you in so long. And he gets Tony to go, it's Sting, one more time for old time's sake. Cody says he's been waiting to share the ring with Sting for a very long time, but Sting kind of throws shade at him by saying, I didn't come here for you. Well, not yet anyway. He says things feel very, very familiar here. And as he says that, he points right to Darby Allin up in the rafters for the TNT Championship. He says the only thing about Sting that's for sure is that nothing's for sure. He says he's glad to be here for AEW, but what he's going to be doing is nobody's business. He gives Cody this kind of condescending side hug and says, see you around, kid, and walks off. So no questions are answered as to what Sting's true motivations are here. He keeps things very ambiguous in this one, but still cool to see Sting. I'm really curious to see where this goes. Will we see Cody versus Sting down the line? All indications seem to be pointing to that based on what we saw in this exchange. I'm kind of on the fence how I feel about Sting coming back to the ring. A lot of people are saying, oh, he's 61 years old, don't let him wrestle. We saw what happened with him and Seth Rollins several years ago, so there's all that fear there. I don't know. Depending on what you can do, you can do things with wrestlers who are a little past their prime and hide their deficiencies. We saw what they did with The Undertaker in the Boneyard match, at WrestleMania this year. He looked great in that thing, but not so great when he does the live in-ring stuff. So maybe they could do something like that with Sting. Who knows? But I'm just very optimistic that it can be done in a way that makes everyone look good in the end. We get a promo from Team Taz backstage, including Taz's son Hook. Ricky Starks declares that Hook is no longer training with the Nightmare family and is training with Team Taz. Taz wraps it up by saying they'll kick anyone's ass. Pretty standard, generic Team Taz promo, it feels like. Then we see the FTR going against the Varsity Blondes. That's Griff Garrison and Brian Pillman Jr. against the former tag team champs here. Good basic tag team match. It's all very done well with the fundamentals and everything. Ultimately, Garrison Pillman, after looking pretty strong here, Pillman's taken out with the Goodnight Express for FTR to win. Then after the match, we see them kind of get a bit of a scuffle at ringside with the Jurassic Express. Back at the arena bar, Alex Marvez interviews Hangman Page. He's got a 6-man tag match next week against the Hardy Party, but no partners yet, so who will he team with? Before Page can say anything, out pop from behind the bar, John Silver and Alex Reynolds from the Dark Order. God, can anyone get a word in with these interviews here? Anyway, they're wearing cowboy hats, the cheesy cowboy, not even real cowboy hats, Woody cowboy hats, saying, how you doing, partner? And Paige says, no, I don't want to team with you guys. And they're like, who else are you going to get? And he's like, okay, sure, let's team up, but I'm not going to join the Dark Order. But Alex and John are very excited about this. I love their energy, boundless energy from Alex and John here. Speaking of the Dark Order, Dustin Rhodes takes on 10 up next. It's a pretty short match here. 10 shows his strength early on, but then on the outside, Aaron Solo, who wrestles Dark a lot, he takes a swipe at 10 and 10 decks him. Yeah, good on you. He swung first. But he gets back in the ring. That allows Dustin to take over, wins the Running Bulldog, and that's pretty much much that. It was pretty open and shut case. Then Evil Uno gets in the ring as the Dark Order are on stage. Evil Uno offers Dustin a spot in the Dark Order as 7. And Tony Schiavone goes, he's not going to want that number. Like, good callback. No, don't make Dustin Rhodes 7 again. So Dustin, like, thinks about it, slaps Evil Uno in the face, and then, like, Uno tells, calls off the dogs and saying, when you finally see the light, you're going to beg to come join us. So, interesting tactic here. I mean, I don't think we'll see Dustin Rhodes join the group, but Uno says, here at AEW, you are the 3rd most important Rhodes family member, which I thought was a pretty big dig there. But, yeah, a short, quick match. I got a pop from them making a 7 reference, but whether that's going to go anywhere, time will tell. We have a pre-taped sit-down interview with Tony Schiavone talking to Brandi Rhodes and Shaquille O'Neal. Shaq talks about how, he and Jade Cargill go way back, but he didn't appreciate what she did breaking Brandi Rhodes' arm a week or 2 ago. He tries to downplay the stuff on Twitter between he and Cody lately, but he cracks a little too wise toward Brandi and kind of says, oh, Jade can show you some moves and stuff. And Brandi's pissed. She takes Tony's drink and throws it in Shaq's face as she walks off, and it cuts to black and everything. So where is this going exactly? It seems Cody's got a lot of irons and a lot of different fires. He could be working a program with Sting. He could be working a program with Shaquille O'Neal. You know what? It's 2020. The possibilities are literally endless. Like, I just don't know where we're going to go with this. I mean, I'm at the point where I'm like, whatever, let's just roll with it and see what happens. But I'll believe something when I see something. So will the Inner Circle stay together or will they dissolve? That's what we hope to find out tonight after Chris Jericho's big ultimatum was issued last week. MJF is the first to speak here, saying he chose and wanted to be part of this group in the first place because he believed in it. Sammy gets mad at MJF and because they're bringing up the whole towel thing from last week. Jericho says, we all saw the footage. We all know what happened with you in the towel. Ortiz ultimately steps in and kind of advocates for MJF and Wardlow, saying, you guys are great assets, but as people, that's debatable. Like, Wardlow, like, you're fine. MJF, you're growing on me like a fungus, but you're still growing on me. Tell Sammy to shake his hand. And ultimately, Sammy basically says if either MJF or Chris Jericho do something to screw up, he's going to quit the group. He shakes MJF's hand. Hager then speaks up and then wonders, why does Wardlow keep staring at me? And Wardlow's like, why do you keep staring at me? And Jericho's like, let's just not stare at each other. Can we do that? And it's just like, the exchange there was pretty funny as well. Then Jericho wants everyone to put him in there, and they all do the single deuce, and there's unity here among the Inner Circle. It was an interesting bit here. There were some funny haha moments between like MJF and like Ortiz as well, and Hager and Wardlow. That exchange is pretty entertaining. Still leaves a lot of open-ended things to where this group can go. Where was Santana, by the way? I didn't really understand where he was. They said, he was so upset he just left. He didn't show up to work this week. But yeah, I thought it was an okay segment, and it just kind of like it calms the waters of the Inner Circle for now, but we'll have to see where this goes down the line. FTR interviewed backstage, and Cash Wheeler and Tully Blanchard are trying to like take turns, like taking the blame for what happened, losing the tag titles of Full Gear. Dax says they're coming to reclaim those tag titles. Pretty short and sweet promo, and it's nice to see interviews backstage that don't get immediately interrupted. Up next, Eddie Kingston, the Butcher, and the Blade take on the Lucha Brothers and Lance Archer in Lance's first tag team match since joining AEW this year. Jake Roberts' attire at ringside sure is something. Before the match officially begins, you get this pre-match brawl. Penta is slammed through the timekeeper's table, and he's taken out of the match entirely, so it's 2-on-3. Phoenix makes a big comeback on the hot tag, does a big flipping dive to the outside, seems to hurt himself in the process, which seems to be a recurring thing with Phoenix, and you just hate to see that happen. Phoenix did with a big double team move by Butcher and the Blade for the baddies to win, but then Archer jumps him after the bell, and the bad guys escape. Kind of interesting to see Lance Archer in this kind of babyface role. I guess it's like tweener still, kind of, but I mean, him being affiliated with the Lucha Bros, who just recently turned face, going against the more established heels in Kingston and Butcher and Blade, could be going somewhere. I mean, I love seeing like hosses, like big destructive babyface hosses can work, and so I'm curious to know how that will go down the line, but I mean, so far, so good. We get a really wild and bonkers backstage segment where you've got Nyla Rose and Jade Cargill and Vicky Guerrero all beating up Red Velvet, and then you've got all these other ladies coming in like Ivelisse and Diamante and Big Swole and Serena Deeb. They all run in and try and make the save here, and then there's a bunch of referees running in. It's so mad. And then all of a sudden we go to see Abaddon taking on Tesha Price. Abaddon not only be creepy, but she also be dominant in this match. She totally squashes Tesha here. Afterwards, keeps beating down Price price until Hikaru Shida shows up with a kendo stick. She dinks Abaddon on the head and knocks her out and helps Tesha escape, but then Abaddon sits right back up, Undertaker style, looks very upset, and Shida does not know what to do. I'm liking how Shida is reacting to Abaddon, kind of like any normal person would to see something like that, like staring them down. I'm really curious to know where a match like this is how it's going to be presented. Two very different styles, very different presentations. I want to see these two actually have a proper match. Backstage at the Inner Circle, Chris Jericho says the group is on the same page and they'll accompany MJF and Wardlow to the ring for their main event match tonight. It's time for the new AEW champion to speak. Kenny Omega and Don Callis arrive at Daly's place in a helicopter, and it was kind of cool. We saw Omega and Don show up on Impact the night before, where Callis explains it's all part of an elaborate plan going back not just weeks and months or years, but decades, ever since they basically met years ago when Don trained to wrestle. He's basically been watching over Kenny like the invisible hand that he is, pulling the strings. Tony in the ring wants to know what happened with the gentleman's agreement that Kenny broke last week in the title matches. I've been in the business since 1987, and I've never been more disgusted. Like, really? That was your breaking point? That what we saw last week? That seemed pretty tame to me, but okay, you do you. Callis and Kenny basically reiterate what they said on Impact. I would say it was a fine promo if I did not see the thing on Impact the night before. He basically kind of hits a lot of the same points. This plan was years in the making. Omega, Jericho, the Tokyo Dome helped basically create AEW. You're welcome. They don't make matches. They make history. They make memories. And then Kenny does the goodbye, mwah, good night, bang to end things up there. Yeah, it was a good promo, but it was done better on Impact. That's all I'm going to say. I know that not everyone who watches AEW was going to watch Impact last night, but I felt that if you're going to do that and just kind of have this like derivative kind of like bullet point promo version from what you saw and the more extended thing with Josh Matthews in the bus, like show us a highlight. Just give us something different in terms of like what you're bringing to the table in AEW now that you're the champion. It was a little different, just a little bit, but they hit so many of the same talking points. I'm like, Impact's version was better. In your main event, MJF defends his Dynamite Diamond ring, which he won last year against Orange Cassidy, who made it to the end of last week's qualifying Battle Royal. Very creative attack early on when MJF puts Orange's hand in his own back pocket and slams him back on hand first into the ring apron. Jericho spent the entire match like just wielding his baseball bat menacingly at people as the Inner Circle at ringside. MJF keeps working Orange's injured hand. During the commercial break, though, the best friends leave ringside and come back with a bunch more people like Brandon Cutler and Top Flight and the Varsity Blondes to even everything up. MJF tries to pull an Eddie Guerrero with Jericho's bat, but Orange is able to turn around on him, which is pretty funny to watch. Orange with a couple of close calls to beating MJF. We get a big brawl with the guys outside. Suddenly Miro shows up and just clotheslines the bejesus out of Orange. That allows MJF to pin and win to retain the ring. He'll be holding on to that for one more year. Afterward, Miro goes nuts on security and just beats the hell out of many of them to close out the show. Although the match itself was pretty well done, very entertaining, told a good story, but I was also very impressed by Miro's showing afterward. Let's see some more angry Miro. It's the best I've seen him since he debuted. Time now for me to decide which show won for the week, NXT or AEW Dynamite. And this week I'm going to go with NXT. I felt that, the pacing and the flow of NXT this week was better than AEW's. I think the matches were of a higher quality as well. I enjoyed the good chaos. There's chaos and there's good chaos. And that's what we saw, I think, with the opening couple segments for NXT. Just like planting all those seeds for the different contenders, possible contenders for Finn, as well as foreshadowing to Karrion Kross's return, which I was a big fan of tonight. I think both shows suffered from that issue I talked about with the interviews being interrupted all the time. Like once or twice across both shows is fine, but when you can count on two hands the number of times it happens, it's too much. I just think, NXT felt more cohesive and told better stories this time around. But what did you all think of NXT and AEW this week? Let me know in the comments section below. I'm Brian Zane, and I'll see you next time.